It's a delight to talk to you. I just, as I told you earlier, just finished reading your story, so it is eminently fresh in my brain. But I'd like you to make a connection with the students first by telling us a little bit about where you're from and what growing up was like that prompted you to go into the military service.
You know, I think it kind of reflects a lot to everybody in life and in society today. We don't get to where we are without going through our life story beforehand. You know, what happened for me on October 3rd, 2009 wouldn't have happened without being born and raised and going through those things in life that we all face. I'm originally from Northern California. Grew up in a tiny little town of about 100 people. Went to school in a town of about 500. So as all you students out there, I can always brag that I graduated in the top 15 of the 14 kids that went to my senior class of high school. Growing up in that kind of community was great. Looking back on it, you know, you look back at your time in school, thinking, you know, what am I going to do when I grow up? You know, thinking high school was kind of the pivotal peak of your life, not quite understanding at 17, 18, 19 years old that your whole life is still so much ahead of you. I grew up in a military family. My granddad served in World War II. He was a combat engineer. He survived Normandy Beach. He survived the Battle of the Bulge. My dad did 2 tours in Vietnam. My oldest 2 brothers both had served. The oldest one, Travis, joined the Army. Had a break in service, and now he's in the Air Force, about to retire here in about 2 years. My second oldest brother went into the Marines. So there was that family history, but it was one of those things growing up that Grandpa Smith and Dad, you know, it wasn't like a requirement for us Romesha boys to go and join and serve. It was always just kind of impressed upon us that we should give back to our country. And giving back didn't mean we had to put that uniform on. Giving back just really, in their eyes, was being a productive member of your community and your society. If you're benefited in your life, you know, you should try to, you know, pay it back forward. But like I said, for me, it was military service. That's what I thought of back in 1999 when I graduated. I didn't know what I was going to do in life. I'm a proud product of C's Get Degrees. Me in school was not probably the best pairing of things in life. So I knew right away for me, college wasn't going to probably be the answer as soon as I turned 18 and left. I needed that time to mature and grow up. And that found me joining the military. But of course, I joined at I tried to join at 17. That's when I graduated. And again, not because I was super smart. It's because my birthday's in August. So I got to graduate at 17. But as soon as I graduated, I'd talked to the Army recruiter. I had everything set up for my contract, knowing that as soon as I graduated, I wanted to leave, go to basic training. Said it was 1999, wasn't a lot going on. And I went up to my dad and kind of explained my life plans at that point, and just told him, hey, you need to sign for me because I'm not 18 yet. And my dad just very humbly kind of looked at me and he said, Clint, I'm not going to sign for you. And of course, in my mind, I'm thinking I'm the youngest of 3 boys. We grew up on a ranch, on a farm. So most of my growing up, we were milking cows and digging fence posts and swathing and baling alfalfa. In my mind, it's like, oh, I'm the youngest of 3 boys. He's already lost his other 2 child laborers. I'm the last one in the house, and he wants to keep me around for another summer. But Dad very, very quickly followed up with, you know, hey, Clint, it's 1999. There's not a lot going on in the world. We're at relative peace. But if you decide to put on the uniform, maybe not tomorrow and maybe not even 20 years of service, may you have to go do something. But there might come a time just by putting that uniform on that you'll have to go and do and see things that no man should have to go and do and see. Because I knew at that point that Granddad was in, like I said, World War II, and I knew Dad did 2 tours in Vietnam. Neither one of them talked about their time in combat was the thing. It was very much the unspoken thing. When they talked about their military service, it was always about their buddies and those good memories they had with the camaraderie of their team and the guys they still talk to 20, 30, 40, 50 years later, like they were still right there, just seeing them yesterday. And that really impressed me, was that kind of relationship and brotherhood. But of course, like I said, I was shocked that Dad wouldn't sign for me. Travis got to join, Preston got to join, Dad got to join, Grandpa got to join. And here I'm sitting, him telling me no, he wasn't going to allow me to at that point. So as soon as I turned 18, very next day, went back to the recruiter and enlisted it in the Army. So didn't know what I was getting into at the time. At that time, I really didn't understand what my dad was telling me. And it didn't really make sense until my first combat deployment in Afghanistan in 2004 and 5, that those words came back after the first couple of weeks in combat, what Dad was really referring to on those things that no one should have to go do and see. Really kind of made sense. And it's one of those things that you can tell someone else, but unfortunately, until you see it firsthand, it doesn't really strike and resonate to the full effect of what those words mean.
So you were in a position where you really did, he forced you to make that decision for yourself. And you also, joining before 9/11, you didn't have the impetus of 9/11 and the emotional reaction to the attack on the United States that prompted you, but rather a motivation to serve.
Yes, that was, we kind of, talking to some of the guys I served with back then, we kind of made that joke of, and I hate to kind of sound jaded like that, it was like, oh man, we were literally the I'm going to join the military for the college money generation. And, being in for those years long before September 11th, 2001, all of our training, we were still very much waiting for the Russians to cross the border into Europe. And that was our main training effort, was being on the lookout for kind of the spread of communism. And then literally overnight, it changed with September 11th. And that's what really impressed me still to this day. My oldest daughter is 20 years old. She was born in July of 2001. So just for a brief few months of her life, her entirety of her life has been during the global war of terrorism. My generation, we had, Grenada, Desert Storm, but unlike this generation, who literally has lived their entire life with this country at war, still impresses me that we have these young men and women that will raise that right hand and volunteer to serve this country. Like I said, my generation was, I'm going to go join for 4 years to get the GI Bill so I can grow up a little bit, experience the world, get out and go to college. Now we have men and women that are signing up knowing that the likelihood of them going overseas right into combat is very high.
You mentioned that you were the C's Get Degrees group, and it's interesting, given what you were just saying about the change between that the military was going to be your way into college, and then now we have a whole generation that has been at war nonstop. But back before that, there was a generation who went to college either to avoid the war or went into the service because they were in some kind of trouble and they couldn't do anything else. And I'm jumping a little ahead here but we have a number of questions about advice for young people who are thinking about going into the service. And given that most of our audience is middle and high school students, I wonder if you would share with them, anymore, you don't get to go into the service because you flunked out of high school. Can you tell them a little bit about what is expected of our volunteer Army these days?
You look at kind of our nation's history of service. And generally speaking, overall, we have had our great men and women rally to the cause when our nation needs it, whether the draft is going on or, as of now, we're an all-volunteer force. And as much as you might hear, kind of this negative kind of mentality of, oh, you only go into the military because you had no other option in life, that is such a falsity that is just absolutely untrue. I want to say I think it's tougher to get into the military than it is some Ivy League colleges. The requirements, not just education, but your physical performance, your ability to have those natural values to not wash out in the first couple of months. It's one of those things that the military service, and I had a great conversation actually with Bob, the former CEO of Lockheed Martin. He went to Columbia for his business degree, and he got invited back, and he told me this story. He got invited back to be kind of their keynote speaker for their the business classes. And one of the kids asked him, what class here at Columbia can I take to be a successful businessman? And Bob simply told him, he's like, there's not a class here. What made me a good businessman was my time in the Marine Corps. The life skills, the life lessons, making the transition out, now going into the civilian world. It's amazing to see how many employers really seek out the veteran community on a couple of things alone. Is one, they're dependable. Their ability to show up to work, their ability to understand they're not just there to exist, but to contribute to a bigger mission. And these things is what the military teaches you on the most basic level. It instills that in you. Now that we've, as current conflicts go on and our military grows, the amount of intelligence that you have to know to operate complex weapon systems. It's not just sit there and charge a hill. It's coordinating, being able to communicate with other assets in your area, knowing how to do, complex tasks in high stress environments. That type of life experience is hard to find anywhere else. I'm not saying everyone needs to go into the military, because it's not for everybody. But not everybody needs to go to college either. I think we need to look at ourselves and do a hard self-assessment on what direction do we want to go in our life? Where do we best? Not one person is always going to be successful at everything, but it's self-identifying what you can be good at and achieve it. And then turn that back around, and how do you help, and again, give back to your country, to your service, to perpetuate that for the next generation.
Well, our main CDP video that we use with teachers introducing the character development program starts with your quote about not needing to wear a uniform for service or sacrifice, that it doesn't matter where you're from or what you're doing. When you see a need, you see a challenge, do you sit there and let it pass you by, or do you stand up and say, this is the right thing to do, and go do it? And in that regard, you are motivating teachers all over the country every day. And thank you for that. And thank you, too, for the perspective on it's gotten so complex for our students these days that the military cannot be a last resort anymore, because the military gets to pick and choose who they want. And yet the military may provide that strengthening of character values and skills that nobody else can really provide, partly because a lot of it happens in the heat of intensity. And in fact, I thought about that a lot when I was reading your book about the lieutenant who was coordinating the airstrikes and had, 30,000 feet of various well-armed aircraft of different speeds and abilities circling above all of you and coordinating them so that they could take out the enemy and not shoot or hurt you guys in the process. That was a phenomenal feat. So there is a lot of good stuff of that nature in there for students to learn about. We have a variety of questions. So we know now why you were in the service, and at the time of your action, you had already been in the service close to 10 years. So you were a seasoned veteran at that point, and you had seen action elsewhere as well, right?
Yes. Yep. That had been, by the time I went to Afghanistan, that was my third combat deployment coming up. Been in 10 years at that point. So I had a lot of, and that's kind of the funny thing. I want to say I had a lot of experience under my belt, but again, every combat deployment was absolutely different than the last one. That was also the great thing of getting to know a new group of guys, building a new team, building that camaraderie, that teamwork together, that brotherhood, and to know you weren't ever going there alone. You had a whole, task force around you that you could rely on, and they were relying on you. That just made it, one of those ultimate challenges of how do we continue to improve ourselves? How do we continue to improve each other? It's not just stand here and bark out orders. It's understanding that each one of your guys has something unique to contribute. How do you get the most potential out of them? And that was one of the, as kind of horrifying as combat is, that was one of the biggest blessings of combat was seeing those great men and women just shine in a moment's notice on their skill sets they brought to the table. You got to work with so many different people from so many different walks of life. Like I said, I grew up in a town of 100 people. I had guys straight out of New York City that, 100 kids in their class wasn't nothing. And it really exposed you to not just where you grew up in this part of America, but how great this country is from coast to coast.
So in your book, I was smiling because I had written down a quote for your book. You said, if we qualified as heroes, and I know we try to avoid the hero term, but sooner or later it's going to come up when we start talking about the medal itself. You said that the fellows you were with were cut from a ragged grade of cloth, a fabric whose folds conceal the shortcomings and failings of exceptionally ordinary men who were put to an extraordinary test. And I love that phrasing. And it raised for me the question, do you think that, the question of what makes a hero for many people, is it that extraordinary test that, to use your word, reveals the hero? Does that speak to the potential in all of us?
I absolutely believe that to be true, that unfortunately you have to go through these moments of just overwhelming adversity to allow you to use the potential that I know is in each and every one of us to shine. If life is always easy, you never have that challenge to dig down deep and really prove not only to yourself, but to those around you what you are capable of. That's what I always encourage. Don't ever take the easy wrong over the hard right. Taking on that challenge is so much more rewarding, even if you get knocked down 100 times and you just keep getting beat down by trying to do something hard and you come up short and time again. What you learn on the time on the ground and bouncing back up will fulfill you more in life than that easy stroll that anybody can do. And it's in those moments that you really can test what you're made out of. And I just believe it's literally deep in our DNA as humans, especially as Americans, that is ingrained in us. We've seen it in so many people time and time again from the start of this country till now. And it keeps coming back. And that's telling me that it doesn't matter if you're from a tiny little town in Northern California or a big city out east, or in the plains of Nebraska or the high mountains of Colorado. I truly believe deep down that we have all that in us. It's just those times where you're faced with that challenge. You make the choice. Do I sit here and just let it pass by, or do I stand up and say, you know what, this might not end perfectly, but something has to happen, and I'm going to take action because I can, and I'm going to own that.
I like that you said you make the choice. That's something that each one of our students can take away from this. I'm going to go to some student questions now. I could sit here and chat with you all day, but I promised I'd do student questions. So someone from Lansford, Pennsylvania sent in the question, what in your early life prepared you to take the actions you took on the day you received the Medal of Honor? And I think they probably mean before you got into training, although I'm sure training was crucial too.
What I really, when I look back on kind of some of the things I grew up with and what I experienced that I think gravitated me to kind of get through that day was my grandfather, Grandpa Smith. He had just this great saying of, don't tell people how great you are. Your actions will speak for you. You don't have to go around and tell everybody that you've done this, you've done that. It's like, just do what you know needs to be done, and they will see it. That was always in the back of my mind. Was you could sit here and tell, I qualify expert every time I pick up this rifle, or I can do 100 push-ups in 2 minutes and max my PT test. And it came more relevant stepping into leadership roles in the military, that when you're asking your guys to do those things, but you're not doing them yourselves, you're not leading by example, you're not showing and being kind of that quiet professional that's just like, yep, I know Sergeant Romesha is always going to be here he's going to tell me to be here at 7, and I know Sergeant Romesha is going to be here at 6:30. He's not going to roll in at 7:05 after he told me I have to be here at 7. And it was that leading from example and going back to what my grandfather told me, you know, don't tell people how great you are, your actions will speak for you. And then I just, you know, really remember my dad telling me and showing me those same things too, that when you tell someone you're going to do something, you do it. Don't ever tell someone you're going to do something that you have no intent of doing. You give them your word, and that's really everything you're worth is your word. A lot of it had to go to, like I said, the training in the military too, because that was the great thing about the military is a lot of times you're proving things to yourself to be faster, better, but you fed off each of the guys around you. You know, you didn't want to let them down. Like you would rather let yourself down long before you ever let them know you were letting them down. That pure motivation was such a great thing to have to fall back on, because even if you were trying and stumbling and failing, here would come a battle buddy to put his arm around you, lift you up. Hey, just take a few more steps with me. And you knew you were never doing anything by yourself. That right there, that mentality of, yep, I might be here by myself for a minute or two, but I know at any given point, I've got a battle buddy coming. One thing I like to kind of refer to is you can look, and I know we do all this social media and stuff, and you say how many followers I got, how many likes, how many people I've got on my friends list or whatever. Still to this day, I guarantee I can make way more phone calls, or just a handful of phone calls even. Hey, Raz, I'm in trouble, I need help. Larson, hey, I'm going through something, I need you here. Lieutenant Bunderman, hey, kind of need a hand. Those guys will drop everything and be here at a moment's notice. Where I think if I put out on my Instagram, hey, whoever's on here, I need something in person, and I doubt I'll get one person that shows up. But those buddies that I served with will be here time and time again. And that's such a special thing to have, especially in kind of today's society where we lose kind of that direct personal connection with people.
It's probably gotten a lot harder over the last 2 years too, with so many people separated by forced isolation. One of our middle school teachers from Acton, California has asked, what do you wish someone had advised you of during your middle school, high school years that you would like to share with students now? You may have just answered that.
Looking back, some of the advice I wish I had back then would probably easily be, hey, you think you know everything, you think you know what life is going to be. You don't. You don't. We're in an ever-changing world, and what was relevant back when I was in grade school isn't even close to what is relevant now. Just be prepared to know that every day is going to be different going forward in your life, and just be excited to face each and every day that you get, each and every new challenge, and know that you don't know everything. You might have an idea how certain things are, but just have an understanding that you can be confident in some of your choices, but know there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance.
Really good advice. Let's turn to the medal and how it's affected your life. Anybody who's watched your living histories or interviews will have heard you say, or have read your book for that matter, have heard you say that you don't feel like you deserved it, and that you wear it for those who made the ultimate sacrifice, which, as you point out, is what many Medal of Honor recipients say. At the end of your book, you said you would instantly trade that medal and everything attached to it if it would bring back even one of your missing comrades in arms. So that medal and everything attached to it. Let's first talk a little bit about the question that it keeps showing up over and over again from students. How did that medal change your life?
Literally overnight, life just got kind of turned upside down after receiving the medal. So I'd already been out of the military. I got out in 2011, early in 2011. had already kind of made that decision before that deployment, even in 2009, that was going to be my last contract for the Army, and I'd get out and go find something else to do. Time to start a new chapter in life. You know, that the battle happened, everything got done. Right away, they talked about putting in for awards and stuff, which is pretty typical. And said my commander came up to me and he said, "Hey, you know, Lieutenant Bunnerman told me what you did that day. I'm really thinking about putting you in for Distinguished Service Cross, which is just under the Medal of Honor." And I told Captain Portis, I'm like, "I don't care what you do, sir. You're the company commander. You can do what you want. I just want to make sure these guys, we got 9 more months left in country. I just want to make sure we get back in 9 months. And from there, once we get back in the States, then we can figure out what else. Just make sure my guys get what they deserve." Because 3 of my team leaders ended up receiving the Silver Star. Bunderman and Gallegos ended up getting the Distinguished Service Cross. So for me, it was, all right, let's just continue mission. I said I got back, transitioned out of the Army, came up to North Dakota to work oil fields. I'd been up here for almost a year and a half about, and no word on awards or anything like that. And my guys would call me and would talk, you know, a couple times a week. And every so often they'd ask, "Oh, you know, son Romesha, you got out of the military. Did you ever get anything for that day?" And, "Well, Raz, you got your Silver Star, right?" "Oh, yeah." "Okay, well, that's all that matters to me." And just, like I said, kind of put everything in the back of my mind. It was, hey, start a new chapter in life. Just a handful of people I worked with knew I was in the military, but other than that, they didn't know if I had any combat deployments or even what my job was. They just knew I was a veteran. And all of a sudden, I get a phone call one day out there working oil fields. I answer the phone, and all of a sudden, it's Colonel Davis, G1 of the Pentagon. Of course, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, "Oh crap, what'd I do? You know, I'm in big trouble if I got a colonel calling me." I've been out for, like,
even though you were already out of the military.
I'm thinking the statute of limitations should have been well up by now, so I'm not quite sure what happened. And this Colonel Davis is like, "Well, we've got something to tell you. We need you to come out here to DC." And of course, me not being, I've never been really on the East Coast very much, definitely had never been to DC or the Pentagon. I just kind of told him, "Hey, you know, it's a great thing with cell phones. You can just tell me over the phone and we can knock this thing out right now." And he said, "No, this is something we gotta do in person." Well, of course, I had to get some time off work, and I went out, showed up at the Pentagon that day. They set me down, giving me this brief. And like I said, in the back of my mind, I figured it was, okay, I'm going to go out there. I'll do a quick kind of awards presentation. I figured, well, maybe if they put me in for that DSC, it probably got bumped down to a Silver Star or something. Because like I said, in the back of my mind, I don't think I did anything other than my job that day. So it was always very confusing. And as I'm sitting there and I'm looking, they've got all this Medal of Honor stuff in front of me, which, like I said, being growing up 80s and 90s, you know, you think of the Medal of Honor and you just think of all of these great American just patriots that have led the way before us. And just the amazing things they did on Normandy Beach during the Battle of the Bulge, listening to bayonet charges in Korea, like just these bigger than life actions. And then all of a sudden it's like, "Oh yeah, you've been recommended for upgrade. You're going to be receiving the medal." And I'm sitting there thinking, well, for what? I didn't do anything special. Like I still literally believe I didn't do anything special. I did something that you could have replaced me with any other soldier, put them in that position. Someone would have stepped up to the same occasion. It just happened, time and place. You never get to pick the time or the place sometimes. It just happens. And I literally went from being oil field working guy up here in North Dakota, kind of out in the middle of the nowhere, to all of a sudden overnight, nationally, people recognize it. And it's one of those bittersweet things because, you know, as a leader, one of the things you're always wanting to do is bring your guys home. The reality of combat and war is that's not possible. You always hope for the best, but if you're not expecting the worst, you really put yourself at a disadvantage mentally. You know, we're not going overseas. We're not going into combat to go sell Girl Scout cookies and popsicles. We're going over to do very bad things to very bad people that want to do very bad things to us. and that is the nature of combat. That's unfortunately the necessary evil to protect what we love as a country and a society. But again, overnight, literally getting the spotlight put on you where people look and say, well, Sergeant Romesha, you were a hero that day. Look what you did. And in my mind, I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, well, no, I really don't feel like a hero. My definition of heroes are those men that don't come home. And we ended up losing 8 guys that day. So how's that a win? How's that a heroic thing when we had 8 Gold Star families never get to see their sons, husbands, brothers ever again? You know, the silver lining to it was the fact that everyone did get to come home. You know, unfortunately, not all of them were alive, but we were able to make sure nobody got left behind. Everybody made it home. And that was a huge thing for me, was during the actions and the combat of that day, it was never being scared about getting shot or dying. That didn't even cross my mind. It's kind of like, that's the business we're in. What scared me is what was happening to everybody else. And what terrified me was being able to maybe survive this and come home and have to look at a Gold Star family and be like, sorry, we couldn't find your son. We couldn't bring your husband back. His body is still over there somewhere. We just don't know. That terrified me. That scared me way more than the thought of getting shot or dying or any of that. That was just overwhelming, kind of the shock of what combat can be. So literally then overnight, you got people saying, oh, Sergeant Romesha, you're a hero. And it's like, no, I'm not. I was a warrior. I got to serve with some of the most amazing warriors I've ever been around. But the hero are those 8 men that never made it home. Just did my job, and I did my job because I had 52 other guys around me doing their job. And if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here. You know, I'm honored and I'm humbled by being selected to wear the medal, but this little blue ribbon of silk isn't mine. It represents not just those 8 men that day, but it represents every man and woman of this country that has put on that uniform, that has worn it, that is still wearing it today. And unfortunately, we'll have to put it on and wear it tomorrow and the next time we have conflict. And they continue to do it time and time again. And it represents all of that together, which is way more than little Clint Romesha from North Dakota.
And yet, the thing that makes this medal so different from all the others is that it was those very people that you're talking about who submitted you for that medal and who felt that you were the one who deserved it. And I know from having the privilege of hanging around you guys that pretty much most of the Medal of Honor recipients say the same thing, that it was for all those of you who were together that day. And a closely related question, one of our students asked, what is the most courageous thing that you have ever seen? I mean, all these guys you were with, you said they were the heroes. Does any one particular effort stand out to you?
I mean, I could name a few right off the top of my head. But I guess really the few that, I mean, just immediately come to my mind is like Specialist Copus. He's a kid from Ohio. He grew up, you know, he had some troubles in high school, kind of troubles in his way of life. Joined the military, thinking, again, like a lot of us, that'll help mature me. You know, Copus was one of the guys that day that during all this chaos going on, he was basically the only gun left in the fight. He was manning a fully automatic grenade launcher off the eastern side of the camp. That whole camp that used to be controlled by the Afghan National Army, they had all fled. That whole eastern side was open. And Copus sat on that gun for almost 13 hours, most of the time by himself, isolated, no one around, and held down the entire defense on that eastern side. No one would have blamed him for displacing from that position. But he literally sat there in the middle of all of that by himself, just holding it down, knowing that if he might have had to displace, retreat back, that could have put us in a more vulnerable situation. thinking back to that day when I said all the chaos is going on, the enemy's already penetrated our wire, we've already lost so much of kind of our outpost, things are burning to the ground. When I went in and talked to Bunderman about, hey, we're going to go recapture the ammo supply point, we're going to go counterattack the enemy. And I walked into the barracks room where basically the last element of guys were, where they're basically just pointing weapons at doors, waiting for anybody to walk through that wasn't speaking English and wearing an American uniform that they were going to shoot, because we had to isolate and condense up so tight. When I just walked in and I said, I need a group of volunteers. That was all I said. There's no more details than that. I had 5 guys stand up: Jones, Delaney, Danley, Miller, and Raz. Without hesitation, these 5 guys stand up after just saying, hey, I need a group of volunteers. And then I tell them, hey, here's what we're going to do. And essentially what I'm telling them is we're going to counterattack the enemy, which means we're going to take us guys, 6 of us in total, to attack a sizable force of 100 plus guys that have the firepower, have the fortified position and elevation on us. I'm essentially asking you guys to go on a suicide mission, and all 5 of them are like, we'll follow you anywhere. You know, they didn't have to do that. It was a choice. It wasn't a, hey, get your butt out there and go run into the enemy fire. It was, I just need a group of volunteers. And then the other thing that really impressed me that I seen was really on a personal, just deep down, you know, emotional level, was we had 9 more months left in country after that day. We had guys like Raz, like Larson, you know, the guys that we had lost, Gallegos and Kirk and our team leaders and stuff, there was never going to be replacing them. But we knew we had to come home in 9 months, and that was the mission at that point on a personal level for us, is let's get home and then we can deal with all this stuff. And in those 9 months, we had young enlisted soldiers step up and be some of the best team leaders I've had. But we've had guys that went through so much stuff that day that no one would have blamed them for saying, hey, life is a little too tough right now, it's too hard, and them wanting to find a way out of country. Not one guy kind of took that easy way out. And still to this day, our platoon, Red Platoon, and it's a combination of so many things, which still just overwhelms me with pride, is, you know, it's been over a decade later, and not one of our guys has taken their life from suicide. You think about what everyone had been through and the times and how much time has gone by and all those things in life that can creep up on you. We've had guys, you know, that have had their struggles, but knock on wood, we are the only platoon that not one of our guys has taken their lives. And that's a testament of that brotherhood. And that, to me, on such a deep personal level, is something to look at and be just so proud to see those men continue on toward tomorrow, to understand we've got more to give and we can make it there and we can do it together.
That's just amazing that you have come through that, and it speaks to the other things that you've talked about regarding teamwork and commitment, and you're sticking up for each other. We have several different questions that I'm going to paraphrase together. They kind of boil down to, what was the one thing that kept you going when things got difficult, or when you were at your darkest point? What drove you forward? And again, I think you probably just answered this, but can you sum that up for us?
You know, again, it was one of those motivations of, like, nothing that day was in the back of my mind, oh, if I do this action, hey, maybe I can go to the White House and receive them. That was, no one wakes up and ever thinks that or does that. That's so far removed from your mind. What it was is thinking, you know, Gallegos and Larson and Mason, them stuck up at that Humvee, you know, isolated, cut off, just getting overwhelmed by the enemy, and thinking to yourself, man, if I was up there, I know they were going to do everything to come get me. Got to do that for them. Thinking to yourself, just, I know each and every one of these guys is trying to do their job to the best of their ability, so I've got to do mine. That was the motivation. And to also sit there and think, I look back and I don't ever really kind of recall thinking, oh, all is lost, even though they breached the perimeter, air support's going to be a ways out. The quick reaction force is going to take hours and hours to get there. I don't ever sit there remember thinking, well, oh man, all is lost, let's give up. Because one, I don't think that's ingrained, in kind of your mentality, especially with the military training, especially with understanding that we're going over there again to do these things that are asked of us that no man should ever have to go do and see. To understand that if you go into a fight thinking you're losing right off the bat, well, you've already lost. And that goes between that fine line of confidence and arrogance. If you have that little bit of doubt, it can just destroy you so quick. So to sit there and know, hey, and I reflect back onto that day, and you look at the kind of we'll call it the stats of the battle. We had 50 Americans. We were in the low ground. The enemy hit us with about 400 fighters. Elevated position by every definition of those stats. 8-1 odds. It should have been a victory for the Taliban every day, all day. I think the separating factor that contributed to it that day was the enemy was trying to kill us because they hated us. They just had so much hate, and that's all they wanted to do was kill us out of hate. That was their motivating factor for their fight. Our motivating factor was we loved each other so much. Our guys to our left and right, you love them so much. And it sounds crazy that you have to go to combat. And like I said, you really want to learn about love, go to combat with your fellow man. You'll learn so much more about love than any romance novel can ever teach you. And it was that motivation of love for your brothers to your left and right. That's what made us come out on top that day. It was, like I said, duty. Your soldiers will do their job because of duty. You order them to, hey, go do something. They'll go do it. But it's that loyalty and love that they will literally charge headfirst into the jaws of hell because of that loyalty and love, and give up everything to include their own life to protect those around them.
I've read a lot of Medal of Honor citations, and yours is one of the most complex that I've ever read. But what stands out to me, particularly when you talk about feeling like you didn't deserve the medal, is that moment that you just described when things were looking really bad and you said, we've got to do something. And you stood up and said, I need 5 volunteers. It wasn't that you needed to have them go do something, but you needed them to go with you. And I think that probably explains that the reason that you're the one wearing that blue ribbon. One of our viewers wrote in that when President Eisenhower had previously been the Supreme Allied Commander, General Eisenhower, during World War II, he thought that character was more important than skill in his leaders. Given your experience, would you agree with that?
I would say that's a very sound description of what to look for in a leader. One of the greatest leaders I had, thinking back to when I first came in the Army, was Sergeant Gary Antes. He was the first NCO that I'd kind of served under, and he was that non-commissioned officer that, as a young private-y nothing, Clint Romesha, that I looked at and I was like, I want to be him. Everything he did was just, he was the example. He just was so easy to follow, and it was because the one biggest piece of advice he ever gave me as a lower enlisted soldier was a good leader will change his leadership style to everybody under him. He will get to know each individual soldier and extract the best out of them and change his style to do that. And a bad leader will sit there and expect every soldier to change to them. That's what made a good leader, was to understand. I know as a leader, I didn't know every weapon system. I was not, didn't have the book answer, couldn't memorize the entire manual of something and be perfect at every skill I had. But I knew how to ask for help, and I knew how to pull out those those qualities from the guys where they excelled in and put them in position and empower them to take control of that. I do think that the character weighs heavily on more so over the skill, because if you got that you're basing everything else off from, you have that foundation, those skill sets will come in because you surround yourself from guys that can fill those gaps.
Guys who are going to stand up when you ask for somebody to go with you.
Absolutely.
The questions have come up about your Medal of Honor picture in the big glossy Medal of Honor book, where we can't see your face because you're looking down. And my main question is, first of all, was that your choice or the photographer's choice?
That was kind of something me and Nick came up with, kind of discussing it. Of course, he's the
professional.
And
then the question from the audience then is, why did you choose to do that? And might it be because the medal brings you sadness as well as pride? It's
one of the, as me and Nick kind of talked about that back and forth, one of the main reasons with having the face down, kind of the eyes hidden, was to represent that you could literally put anybody under that Stetson. Anybody could step under that Stetson and fulfill that role. That we all have it inside ourselves. It's not Clint up there, but you could literally, it represents everybody in America right there. Part of it was also a humble reflection of the loss of those 8 men and to never forget them. And then, part of it was just the overwhelming pride that's so hard to convey, and just a look. It was easier to kind of hide the eyes to do that, I thought. Because the eyes tell a lot of things, and it's so hard to capture that amount of pride of what I got to see that day and such heroics of all the men around me, that kind of represented that position, that pose, kind of encapsulated all of that.
One of our students asked, have any of your personal values changed over time during your service to the country?
I think none of them really changed, but I definitely know I had more added to. I said I grew up, like I said, my dad and my grandfather very much instilled a lot of those values. They had a big thing that they used to talk to me about, hey, don't have too many priorities in your life, because those priorities are going to change tomorrow. But always be honest, always be truthful, always have integrity. Because if you have those always, doesn't matter what's going on in your life, you have a foundation that can be built upon time and time again. The ones that the military really expanded for me and added to, so I could build a bigger foundation, is that loyalty, that patriotism, that selfless service, that sacrifice. And didn't get to see those things, not just said, but visually seen firsthand what the definition of each of those words were.
Right. Closely related to that, someone asked, did your time in the military change your idea about the freedoms we have as Americans?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like I said, growing up in that small little tiny town, very much an isolated spot of Northern California, and growing up, I used to think to myself, man, this really sucks, because I got to go 45 minutes to Susanville, California, to even go to a McDonald's. And I'm thinking, I'm watching TV and stuff, and it's like, oh, there's a McDonald's on every corner of every street in America. But yeah, it's a half-day effort to convince mom or dad. We're not just driving 45 minutes to McDonald's, and I hadn't had a cheeseburger or nuggets, but maybe twice in my life before I was 18. So to give kind of that little snapshot background, that when I joined the Army, like I said, in 99, my first duty station was Germany. And just so happens I fell into a unit with the Big Red One that we were already forward deployed to Kosovo at that time.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know much about Kosovo other than hearing the things about what was going on with Milosevic and the Serbs and the Albanians and the genocide stuff going on in the mid to late 90s. And then we got involved. So 2 weeks upon graduating basic training, shipping over to Germany. 2 weeks after being in Germany, my unit was already deployed. I fell into them in Kosovo. And as a 18-year-old kid that used to complain about going 45 minutes to McDonald's, I was put in the middle of a country where we had to do military escorts for the Serbs or the Albanians to take them with their tractors to get fuel so they could farm their fields. Because if they didn't have a military escort to go to the gas stations crossing through either a Serbian or Albanian town, they would get killed. And I thought to myself, man, I am such a snot-nosed little punk that I thought my life was hard, that I wasn't that free because 45 minutes away was McDonald's. And we literally have to have a military escort just so these people can get fuel to farm their land, to raise their crops, to feed their families. Wow, I am just so irresponsible on the beautiful gift I got given just from being born in this country, and that was that freedom. It really put into perspective of, you think if your life is tough now, and I'm not trying to sound like the old, we used to walk 10 miles both ways uphill in the snow to school type, but you really, like I said, I didn't know what true tyranny was until I seen it firsthand. You read about it, you think about it, you think you have an idea about it, and I think you can have a deep appreciation for what it might look like, but to see it firsthand, that really woke me up, that this gift I've been given, just being born here, I took for granted so heavily as a young teenager, thinking, wow, my life is so tough. For that proportion of it in kind of a visual speak, it was tough for me, but it definitely wasn't, worrying about getting mass genocide just to go put diesel in the John Deere to go plow that day.
Wow, that is really something. That talk about a life lesson and a whole new sense of perspective. We're almost out of time, but I've got questions. We could go on for days. A couple of questions I'd like to squeeze in before we're done here. This one is from a middle school, high school teacher in Wisconsin. I think it's really interesting. This teacher asks, as Afghan refugees begin to filter into schools, and by the way, audience, I think this is a question not just for teachers, but for you as students to consider. As they begin to filter into schools, what do you think teachers need to understand culturally and or linguistically about these new students coming here?
I think for me personally, the biggest thing is, the reason America is because of what we represent. Just because you're coming from a different country, I think to embrace what we have established ourselves on, our identity, to share that with them, to get them to embrace that idea, that philosophy is just as important as kind of the cultural constructs of, what I'm always kind of conflicted on this because, if I treat you like you're coming from your country, do you ever really feel like an American? If I'm basically segregating you because of where you come from, and I'm bending over backwards to, I guess, lack of a better term, be PR with it. Do you ever really embrace what we have done as a country? What we want you to contribute to us, to make us better. You have something to offer. Let's incorporate that instead of isolate it. And I think that's the big thing there is, hey, I want to know, what it was like being over there. Share those stories, but let you know how it is to be. I don't want you to be an Afghan American. I want you to be an American right alongside me.
Well, maybe that's the answer to this next question. This is from a student who asks, as students, what do you think we could do to show respect and honor to our country?
I think the biggest way to show honor and respect is let us never forget how we got here, where those values align to getting here, and let's not deviate from them. Let's sit here and not be, no country has a perfect history and a perfect past. We've had our dark moments. Let's not beat around the bush of that. But we've also done so many great things that have elevated the world overall to a better place than it was 250 years ago. You know, we can sit here and beat us up on kind of the few skeletons in the closet that this country might have, but we have done and contributed so many more better things that has, like I said, lifted up so many more people around the world. Let's continue to do that. Let's continue to reflect on the good. Let's not ignore the past or ignore any of the bad things that have ever happened, but let's learn from it and embrace what we've learned and push that forward into continuing this history of what was established before us and keeping those values and staying the course to understand that we didn't get here because of our bad things we've done. We got here because we learned from that and we improved ourselves on it, and we got to continue to improve on it instead of holding ourselves back for things that are no longer in our control. Again, I've had quite a few conversations with the guys that I'd served with that we'll get in those moments of the what ifs and what happened back then. I can never change what happened yesterday. Not in a million years. I can wish it all I want. I every day wish I could give this medal back and everything attached just to share one more beer with any one of those 8 men. The reality is that's not possible. And the only thing I can affect is what I do tomorrow. And as long as I'm showing up to do something tomorrow, I can change something.
Clint, thank you so much for sharing that with us. Such great tips and thoughts for our students. Great advice, above all, great example. And thank you for what you have done to do exactly as you just described in forwarding this country and what we believe in and what we stand for. It was a privilege to talk with you today, and I hope we can do it again sometime soon because we have so many questions that I didn't get to. I'm going to turn the webinar over to Noelle Wall now, who will tell our audience a little bit about the Medal of Honor Society. And Clint, thank you again so much. We'll be in touch real soon.
Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you for that inspiring interview, and thank all of you for joining us today. Please visit us at cmohs.org. As Kathy mentioned earlier, you can access all the lessons of the Medal of Honor Character Development Program, learn about the Medal of Honor recipients by reading their citations, watching their videos, and get the most current information about our upcoming webinars and other events. Also on our website, you can access the Character Development Program online training for teachers, which will prepare you to use the lessons and materials with your students. We would also like to thank our sponsors who make webinars like this possible. If you do have any questions about donating, please reach out to Kate Smith, whose email you will see on the screen here. For those of you joining with us live, after we finish, you will see a survey pop up on your screen. Please fill that out so that we can continue to improve these webinars and make them the best possible teaching tool for you and for your students. Again, thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you on a future webinar.